Yes.
All right, well, thanks for the opportunity, Manan and Becky, right? So, hey folks, my name is Shailesh Manjrekar. I'm the CMO for CloudFabrix.
Sorry, can you also share your screen on this? Because there's one person on, and then the recording won't catch your slides.
Yeah, folks. So again, thanks for staying late. So we have a very exciting agenda for you guys, right? So primarily, I'm going to talk about 4 use cases, right? So telco service assurance, campus analytics, unified network observability, and asset intelligence, right? And how we make Splunk better, right? Or what's a better together story as it pertains to these 4 use cases. Okay. So feel free to ask questions. Okay. I see some familiar faces here. Okay, and then I also will follow up with a demo. Okay, so who is CloudFabrix? So we've been actually a long-term Cisco partner, right? And now with the recent acquisition with Splunk, we are also a Splunk partner, right? So we are actually a build partner for Splunk, but very well known in the industry. We've been around for quite some time, well recognized by analyst community. So you can see quite a few accolades here. So we work with Gartner, right? So called out us for GenAI. They have also called out us for what the industry calls telemetry or observability pipelines, okay? Which is an upcoming capability where you are able to send from any source to any sink, do data transformations, and so on and so forth, right? There are quite other few analysts who have also called us out, right? So we are known for our innovation. So here you can see GigaOM Radar report, 30 odd players, right? And we are one of the outperformers. Good customer traction. So these are Gartner peer insights, right, representing customers who have used us. Okay, quite a few accolades there as well. Okay, so as I said, we are a partner on the build path. Okay, so work closely with the Splunk team as well as with the Cisco team for quite some time. Okay. So primarily the use cases what we're talking about, right? So who are the personas who are going to benefit out of this, right? So first and foremost, we have IT ops and IT planning persona. So one of the use case or what I'll be demonstrating is what we call asset analytics, right? And what it does is it provides you visibility into your assets. Okay, it provides visibility into asset application dependency maps as to how these assets are connected. So very popular service or application when it comes to technology refresh, when it comes to change management and so on. The other kind of personas who would benefit out of this is network and NOC admins, right? So these are the guys who are managing their network, right? And they're using Splunk as the data platform, right? And now we have apps which can get value from their networking domains and networking infrastructure on top of Splunk. And the third kind of admins or personas are really platform ops who are trying to ask unknown questions, right? And the application admins who are looking at service assurance, service delivery, they're looking at cross-domain correlation with ITSI and so on, right? So on a high level, what I'll be demonstrating is we have Splunk-based apps to target those 4 use cases. And then we have content packs for ITSI, okay? So that's kind of the connect with Splunk. So on a high level, this is how things come together. So obviously, with App Dynamics and Splunk, things are getting integrated, right? And they continue to get integrated at different levels. So App Dynamics provides APM and on-premises capabilities, right? Obviously, Observability Cloud provides you cloud native. What we bring to the table is really the infrastructure observability and the telco service capabilities, right? So all the data sources pertaining to networking, right? So we have a very broad data source integration with Cisco portfolio, right? Because we've been a long-term Cisco partner, right? And we have the ability to bring in all of that networking data into Splunk and glean insights out of it. So we have we have a platform, right, which we call Robotic Data Automation Fabric, right? So that's really the basic building block for doing data ingestion, data transformation, data routing, right, data enrichment. And it's a low-code environment. That means we have 1,000+ bots, right, which actually allow you to do integration with commonly used data sources. Like, for example, you want to connect to a Zabbix, you want to connect to Prometheus, right? You want to connect to CloudWatch, we already have a bot ready, right? So your POV cycles, they shrink significantly when you are using a low-code environment like this, okay? So we have bots for data integration, preparation, right, for AI/ML actions, updates, right? The whole 9 yards, okay? And this really is kind of our major building block, which takes data from all the networking sources, does the magic around enrichment and so on, and is able to put that data back into Splunk Enterprise. Okay. So on a high level, this is how we work, right? So we actually have the ability to ingest data into Splunk platform through RDAF, and then you would have Splunk applications, whether it be SIEM, whether it be ITSI. But then now you also have CloudFabrix apps, right, which are Splunk-based apps. The other way is basically, if you are an existing Splunk customer, we can take that data and build dashboards out of that as well, right? So giving the choice to the customer on what they intend to do, okay? So this is how the integration looks like, and this is going to be the focus for our conversation today. So you see Splunk Enterprise and Splunk Cloud Platform. For now, we have decided to focus on Splunk Enterprise because most of our data source integration is on premises, right? So Robotic Data Automation Fabric. So this is a data fabric which allows us to bring in all kind of networking data, right? Whether it is Cisco networking, whether it is Juniper, whether it is Arista, what have you, right? So all kind of networking, whether you have SD-WAN, you have data center, your campus, right? Mobility, right? Name the data source, and we have that integration already done, right? So we have the ability to bring in all of that data into the platform. And then we can either have the apps, the Splunk-based app, glean insights into the data, right? Or we have content pack for ITSI, which does all the enrichment of that data, and then you follow through, your correlation searches, your episodes, and so on, right? So it basically enables the correlation much better in an ITSI context, particularly for the networking sources. Yeah, is it making sense so far, folks? I see some Splunkers here. Joe, make sense? Yeah. Feel free to ask questions. Okay, we are a small crowd, so let's make this interactive. Okay. So this is what we mean by Splunk-ify, right? So as I said, we also have the ability to build dashboards, right? And we have quite a few customers who are using RDAF, right? Particularly in the telco space. So what we have done is Splunk-ify actually automates the process of taking these dashboards and the data and ingesting that into Splunk, right? And why would they do that? Because there are quite a few large customers who are already using Splunk, right? And they don't want another single pane of glass. They want to use Splunk as a single pane of glass. So while we take care of the data ingestion and the data integration and the data source integration, right, we would happily allow Splunk to be that single pane of glass, right? And that particular migration is very easy with Splunk-ify, right? And what it does behind the scenes is it looks at the data definition, creates a JSON file, creates a tar file, which Splunk can easily import as an app, right? And the same thing happens on the data side as well. So the data gets ingested from RDF into the HEC collector, right? So we use the HTTP event collector to ingest data into Splunk. Yeah, I'm sure you guys are familiar with those environments, right? Yeah. So this is how, the data moves and then the app moves, right? And this can be accomplished with a few kind of keystrokes, right? So we have automated this entire process, okay? So that was kind of the basic explanation of the building blocks. Did you have a question? All right, yeah. And how we integrate with Splunk, right? Now I'll get to the use cases, right? So as I said, there are 4 use cases we want to focus on, and that's where we are getting traction, right? So we've been talking to a broad audience across Splunk from, technology perspective, sales perspective, and so on and so forth, right? So the first use case is around telco service assurance, Okay. And if you know telco space, right, so it's a very complex environment, right? So you have campus, you have data center, you have mobility, you have optical, right? And each of these domains have different data types. Somewhere you have SNMP trap, somewhere you have syslog, somewhere you have GNMI, somewhere you have, hotel, right, and so on and so forth. So how do you bring all of this data, normalize it, right, and enrich that data so that now you can do, correlation and on top of that and so on, okay? The second problem is when you have so many disparate tools, right, how do you basically provide a single pane of glass across those tools, right? So those are the commonly encountered challenges what we see in the telco world. So what is that we have done, right? So again, as I said, we work very closely with the Cisco team, right? So this is a stack which we have put together primarily for the telco customers working with the Cisco CX team, right? So here you can see these are the different domains, right? Campus, IP, optical, and so on across different functions, whether it is physical, VNF. PNF, CNF, and so on and so forth, right? And all of this data gets ingested through our RDAF, right, which is our data fabric, right? And then we are able to do some level of service assurance ourselves, right? But as you can see, there are a lot of other tools which are involved in this stack from the Cisco portfolio, right? So there is NSO, BPA, which is used for orchestration, service provisioning, and so on, right? And then there is a single pane of glass, which in this case, in Splunk case, this could be ITSI, right? And we bring in all the other underlying technologies, right? So this is a way for us to collaborate between Splunk and us for telco use cases, right? And this is something which we are hearing from the telco customers, right? So many of them are already Splunk users and Splunk customers, right? And they want to see, hey, how can we basically leverage all of this data, right, and build a solution on top of this, right? So this is a case study where we are already there today, so, right, and this is where we are in production today, right? So you can see one of the top tier telco, right? And what we want to do as a next step is bring all of this solution onto Splunk as a data platform, right? So you can see across 25 data center, 10 campus site, 5,000 retail site, right? A number of different telco, Cisco portfolio components here, right? So there's DNAC, there is Meraki, and so on and so forth. All of that gets fed into our CloudFabrix, RDAF. There are also provisioning tools, right? And then it gets, correlated and so on, right? So what's the end result, right? Data and tools integration. We provide asset visibility, asset insight, right? And service assurance, right? And in this scenario, Splunk can easily be inserted as a single pane of glass, right? So that's one kind of an example of how we could work together. Another case study is for another customer. Again, this is a production environment for us. They're also looking at Splunk integration, a variety of disparate tools. And earlier, without CloudFabrix, it was a lot of complex environment going from point to point, right? With RDAF, it has become now a lot more simplified with all of these data sources getting fed into CloudFabrix, right? And then the output can be fed into Splunk ITSI. So again, as I said, where we excel is in the networking space, right? Being part of the Cisco kind of portfolio for a long time. So you can see what the domains we support is data center, campus, WAN, SD-WAN, right? So these are data sources which we already have integration with. The topology, again, a wide variety of topologies we can support, CDP, BGP, and so on, right? Same thing with data collection mechanisms, different data types, whether it is gRPC, bulk stats, right, which is very common in a 5G environment, right? Supported domain controllers, ITOM tools, right? So as I said, we have almost 1,000 plus of these data sources, right, connected to the bots, okay? And that's what the low-code environment allows us to quickly do, okay? And then we have also built an ITSI pack, which I'll show you, right, for each of these use cases, right? And this is something which I'm sure the Splunkers are very familiar with, right? So you bring in the events and alerts, right? And then there are correlation searches, right? There are aggregation policies which turn into episodes and so on and so forth. And we have built content packs for this commonly encountered use cases. So this is an example of ITSI service, right? So this is a telco service assurance service, and I'll show that to you in the demo as well. But this is a corporation, Acme Corporation. It has these different domains, right? And across these domains, it's doing fault management, performance management, right? For metrics, right? Fault management is essentially being able to correlate asset analytics across these different domains, right? And where there are VNF, PNF, CNF functions, there are a number of KPIs which we have defined, right? So this is an example of a content pack for telco service assurance. Any questions on this so far? Making sense? Yeah. So the second use case is around campus analytics, right? And again, just to give you a background, so we had these applications previously running on the Cisco platform, right? So there were customers, right? So for each of these use case, right, there have been requirements from the field that, hey, there is a reason why we have developed this use case and this application, right? So campus analytics use case was what they call the return to work, right? So in this case, what happens was post-COVID, campus data center admins, they wanted to find out how many customers or people are actually returning to the campus, how many of them are logged in, how many of them are actually actively using the network and so on. That was really the genesis of this use case. Okay? So what we have done here is we basically, before us, this was how the picture was, right? This is a before picture. After picture is a lot more simplified. We connect through our bots, to Cisco DNAG, Meraki, Prime, what have you, and even directly to device integration, right? And we bring in all of that data, we basically transform that, enrich that data, right? Aggregate that data, and then are we able to ingest that into Splunk indexes, okay? And from there, you can either look at the apps, right? As a Splunk-based app, or you can look at it from a correlation perspective where you're doing noise reduction and so on. Okay? So this allows you all kind of heuristics when it comes to return to office and campus analytics and so on. How many users are logged in, where are the hotspots, and so on and so forth. Okay? It also provides you things like health and compliance tracking. Hey, there are wireless access points. Now, is the software on top of this, is that in compliance? What currency is that? Is that N-1, N-2, or has that gone end of life and end of service? Okay. So these are some of the dashboards. Again, I'll show you, in the demo. So this is DNAG. So DNAG is actually a controller for folks who don't know, right? So this is actually a controller for data center, right? And supports wired and wireless devices. And what we are able to provide is all kind of heuristics in that from that campus network, right? So each of these widgets is doing, behind the scenes, is doing an SPL2 query on a Splunk indexer, right? And we have ingested all of that data from RDAF with all the data enrichment into those indexes, right? So you can see, device health status, collection status, right? Wireless controller health status, right? Reachability status. So all kind of heuristics for that campus. Okay. Another issue, right? So with Cisco, there isn't an ability to actually aggregate all the DNACs, right? So this was again asked by the field, right? And we are not only just able to aggregate DNACs, but even if it is a third-party environment. So one of the customers whom we were working with the Cisco team, had for a period of time, they had Cisco and they also had HP Aruba, right? So which are kind of competing products, right? And they were phasing from one to another, but they wanted visibility into both of those, right? And we were very uniquely be able to do that real quick, right? So here you can see we have aggregated across 4 DNACs, right? So this is a very valuable capability, right? What we bring to the table, right? Showing you the entire campus capability, right? Similarly, you can do, slice and dice this data in whatever form you want. So this screen shows you RTO1, which is essentially a geo, right? Say Alpharetta in Georgia, right? There could be another one in Florida, right? And so on and so forth. So you can slice and dice that data as you want. So that was the second use case, right? So campus analytics. So we talked about telco, we talked about campus. The third is around unified network observability and automation, right? So this is the use case which is more prevalent in enterprise network world, right? Where you have again a variety of different data sources, right? Across different domains. There could be edge, there could be SD-WAN, right? There could be a bunch of different networking tools, right? Whether it is Thousand Eyes or a CDN, right? Or infrastructure tools like Nagios, right? Prometheus, Telegraph, and we bring in all of that data through the RDAF, right? The Robotic Data Automation Fabric, right? And we can also do direct device integration to provide you end-to-end visibility, right? Single pane of operations through Splunk, right? So Splunk becomes a single pane of glass here. Okay? So this is the unified network observability dashboard, right? So again, this is an ITSI content pack for the, what we call unified network observability. So you can see here, again, Acme Enterprise, and then is campus, is data center, SD-WAN, and underneath you have different domains here, right? And again, there are a bunch of KPIs which we are defined, right? So as you guys know, with ITSI, everything is a service, right? So we have to basically model that as a service, right? Like how we had for entity modeling. It's very similar if you know, right? And then we are able to showcase the topology widgets, right? We are able to showcase, how the services are configured, right? So here you can see this is by services, right? So services by subtype, by status, right? So because networking would have on top of them a bunch of applications and microservices running, right? So we are able to show the health of those services. Okay? By customer, this is a multi-tenant solution, by the way, right? So a lot of MSPs use us for data integration and enrichment as well, right? Same thing with the topology view. We can badge that topology view with the alerts we get it. Okay. We also have path visualization, right? We have topology visualization, and we have geomaps, right? So again, a very rich capability when it comes to network observability, right? And this is something we can quickly enable as a use case on top of Splunk. So with that, we come to the fourth use case, which is asset analytics, right? Again, a very popular use case, right? So what we are able to do here is, so with CloudFabrix, we can talk directly to dictionaries. We can talk to third-party, CMDBs, right? We can talk to vendor integrations, right? Or we can do the discovery ourselves, right? All the way through the stack, all the way from applications to, virtualization, containerization, right? All the way to virtualization, physical network storage, compute, all of that, okay? And more importantly, it's not just doing the topology discovery, but building those application dependency maps, right? So what is connected where, right? And a lot of customers, big customers, before they have to do, say, a data center migration, right? Or they're doing an application migration, and they don't even know what kind of assets they have. And what will happen if my network switch is refreshed or moved? Who is going to get affected with it, right? What are the applications? You have no way of finding that out. So this particular use case is primarily for IT planning purposes, right? Before you take that step where you're either moving to the cloud, you're repatriating from the cloud, you need to know how your assets are laid out, right? And that's what we provide you. Okay, so this what we are able to provide is lifecycle and supportability insights, right? That hey, it's not just how the assets are connected, but what's the versioning on this asset, right? Is the asset, the currency, is it N-1, N-2, or has that gone end of life? And now it's a security vulnerability for you, right? Change acceleration, when you're doing change management, when you're doing plan of record and compliance, capacity utilizations. You have a bunch of network switches. You don't know how many ports are used and how many ports are not used. Same thing with storage and network. So we go across 4 different entities, right, if you will. So it's basically compute, it's network, it's licensing, right? You can see your licensing insights we can get. Hey, what are your licensing? Where is your certificates expiring and so on, right? So the entire data center map, if you will, right, can be kind of I'm going to see with this. Okay. Yeah, all right. I don't want to. Yeah, so so application and data center migration is one. So FinOps, right? So as I said, this is again very popular when you have to basically understand, hey, what's been utilized, how it is utilized, right? Planning purposes, OpEx reduction, right? Vendor OpEx, because a lot of this switching vendors now do consumption-based pricing, right? I mean, though physical switch is in on premises, they'll charge you for ports which have been used, right? Risk mitigation, as I said, you can quickly find out whether this is, this currency is actually in play or it's end of life and end of services, right? Productivity gains. So a lot of the data centers or the customers we talk to, many of them don't have this automated way of doing things, right? Even if they have CMDB, right? So a lot of these guys do have CMDB, but they don't have the ability of doing this almost in near real time. So we do this topology discovery almost near real time, right? And one of the common use cases, we have is, hey, I have a CMDB, say ServiceNow or BMC Remedy, and now with all this metadata and discovery you have done, can you update my CMDB? Right, so that's one of the other popular use cases which we encounter. Okay. So this is again, similar dashboard. This is a Splunk-based app. It is showing all the networking resources by region, by site type, right, by device role, right. So basically, by device family, you can see, right, is it Cisco Nexus, is it Catalyst, what have you. Right? This is other question. So app dependency, right? How are things connected? Hey, how was this network switch connected to which application, to which host, and so on. So if you were to do change management on a network switch, how is it going to affect other users and so on, right? So you can see connected applications, connected host. Okay. This shows you, it can go all the way, not just on your networking gear, but IP telephony as well, right? So Cisco has a lot of IP telephony gear, right, out there. So we have all of that data source integration as well. Okay. We also have the ability to actually understand or basically predict the risk of a particular infrastructure as to how it will affect a particular business service based on where is that infrastructure located, what stack is it part of, and so on and so forth. Okay. So this is how the application dependency map looks like, right? So you can see the switches, you can see the servers it's connected to, you can see the applications you are connected to, right? So this makes it easy for IT planning purposes, for change management, and so on. Okay. So that was my last slide. So I'll quickly show you, a couple demos. But before that, any questions, any comments? Making sense so far? Makes sense? Yeah, so good question. So we are in the process of actually publishing Splunk-based app, right? I mean, these are all operational, but it's not published in Splunk, it's just the packaging. But if you were to look for, it's called Asset Analytics, right? The second one will be called Campus Analytics. The third one will be Telco Service Assurance from CloudFabrix. We are publishing 4 apps, right, for the 4 use cases. Okay, yeah, and so let me, you guys able to hear me, right? So let's start with the campus network use case, right, which I talked about. Okay. And this is, as you can see, this is a Splunk, this is an app running in Splunk Enterprise. Okay. And we can look at, right, so whatever I was showing you on the slides, right, so API endpoint distribution, this is wireless controller health, right, device collection status, right. So reachability status of each of those devices, right? Role distribution by distribution and so on and so forth, right? The software version on each of this. So all kind of heuristics when it comes to your campus analytics. We can also actually go into ITSI and look at the same dashboards. So it's on the VPN, right? So these are the services, right? Which I'm sure you guys are familiar with, right? But you can look at the different content packs, what we talked about. You can look at a tree view. Right, so this is actually the campus analytics use case. So you can see the service pertaining to the enterprise, but then underneath that you can see all the SD-WAN services, the data center, the campus network services, and a bunch of different sub-services. And each of these has a KPI associated with it, right? Right, so you can see the KPIs associated with it, and it will show you the health of those KPIs, right? Similarly, if you look at so this is for the telco service, right? So we talked about, hey, we are able to do performance management as a service, fault management as a service across these different domains. And again, each of them have their own KPIs. Okay. Again, it's a standard. I'm sure you guys are familiar with, how you define, entities and KPIs and services and so on, right? So we have done all that 9 yards. Okay. You can also look at the same dashboards here. So this was that return to office, if you remember, right, on the campus analytics use case, right? And it will show you the entire campus, right? And then you can filter on, okay, well, I want to only see my DNAC controller in Alpharetta, right? And it will show you that, right? Or you can go back and say, hey, sorry, Dallas, right? Or you can look at RTO phases, which is essentially different geolocations, right? You can look at CLLI codes, right? So all kind of heuristics on those devices is available, okay? SSID pertaining to the clients and so on, right? So that's, let me show you one more dashboard. So this is asset intelligence use case, okay? And here you can go and look at all the assets, right? You can look at, if you want to look at assets by, say, plan of record, right? So this shows you the entire inventory around what kind of networking gear you have, whether it's access, whether it's fabric extenders, whether it is routers, it's core aggregate, right? What kind of DC controllers you have, right? You can actually even, and then what kind of currency it has. So N-1 is a currency before the current currency, right? So N-1, N-2, right? On each of these devices. And it is, you can see this is all kind of Cisco products, right? ASR 1000, which is a gateway, right? There is a catalyst, there is a nexus, right? Whatever, and it will show you, hey, this has gone red. That means the OS on this particular Cisco switch is actually end of life, right? You can also kind of drill down on some of this, right? So if you want to look at a particular asset and do a drill down, right? So link to app dependency dashboard, it cross launches from here and it will show you how this particular asset is connected, right? So it's connected to one application, is connected to one host, and so on, okay? So we talked about campus asset. Yeah, I think that's pretty much right? Most of this, right? Let me think. Oh yeah, actually, we can go back and look at a few other things here. Right, so application dependency map is an interesting one. No, it's not on this system. One second. So yeah, if you want to see dependency map, right, it will actually show you how it's interconnected, right? And this would give you the visual representation of all the connectivity within the data center, right? It's pretty powerful. I mean, this helps you for the data center modernization, for change management, right? And so on. Right, you can look at licensing assets, right? So certificate chats, right? So how soon are those certificates going to expire across domains? Right, you can look at software, you can look at IP telephony, right? All the networking hardware, you can look at IP telephony, you can look at software across those assets, right? So you can see assets by vendor. So it's Cisco, but it's also Juniper, right? It's Anio Systems and Viptela is actually acquisition, I believe, VMware did, I believe, right? Yeah. But yeah, I mean, this is all multi-vendor as well, right? I mean, as you would imagine in any big data center, it's not just one vendor. There are multiple vendors they will use for networking. So that's asset intelligence. So again, to recap, right, we talked about 4 use cases, right? So we talked about telco, we talked about campus analytics, we talked about unified network observability, and we talked about asset intelligence, right? So I think we also have a dashboard pertaining to unified network, right? So this is all, SD-WAN. So you can look at the inventory, you can look at actually all the alerts, right? You can look at how many alerts were suppressed because of a suppression policy, how many of them were basically cleared. You can look at, so VCO is Velo Cloud. So this is a SD-WAN implementation from VMware, right? So syslog, SNMP traps, right? So events by state. So anyway, I'll pause here. Any questions, comments, thoughts? Yeah, yeah, sure.
The network graph connectivity graph.
Oh, the connectivity part. Yeah.
So what are these things? These are network appliances?
Yeah, so these are endpoints. Okay. So these are, I believe these are switches. Go ahead.
This combination of, so this is a SD-WAN topology. We have switches and chassis, we also edge devices and gateways. So this would be in this network, you can have your gateways across the world. You can have one in Australia, one in Europe, and then they're connected. And then once you have the gateway, you have a kind of a chassis that like a CP device that's connected. So if you see, we have a geo map that we shown, so they actually will show on the geolocation where they're located and how they're connected. And we can also overlay IPsec tunnels, GRE tunnels on top of it to show end-to-end connectivity as well.
Yeah, and just to add to Manoj, in addition to the SD-WAN, we can do this mapping even within a data center network. Within a data center, you will typically have routers or switches, firewalls, load balancers, storage devices. We map out everything within a data center. Or if you have a campus or an enterprise facility, you typically have access points, like in this building. Like you have wireless LAN controllers managing those access points. And we talked a lot about DNAC, which is essentially a controller to manage all of these wireless devices. And large enterprises will have multiple of these DNACs managing the entire wireless infrastructure. So we can map out the campus networks, the data centers, the SD-WAN that he talked about, and bring everything together under one umbrella and push the data into Splunk, give you the unified visibility.
That makes sense?
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah. Joe, you are.
Well, I was just gonna say, this is, I think one of the things coming from, the Cisco perspective, but I'm not coming from that dynamics, I've been at Cisco for about 7 years now. CloudFabrix, we did some of this on top of the platform we built prior, but that's where Splunk presents such a unique environment for us, is to be able to take all these different pieces of telemetry and data that Cisco provide, which is really good in and of itself. But where you guys, where the customer gets all the value, is when I can put it together and correlate and do things like, and this is gonna be very similar to the observability offerings we're offering. And CloudFabrix is very good at taking all of these disparate sources, putting them together in one place where you can access and see all this, put it all together. I mean, honestly, at the end of this, I look at this and go, do I need a CMDB? Because, I'm only doing is copy and paste, basically, right? Importing it. But this is where the partners make such a big difference for Cisco, is that we've got all these great things. And now with Splunk, we've got this platform that is, it's not like anything we've had before. And they're utilizing this to be able to then share this and provide a solution versus a product. And I think that's one of the biggest advantages that I've seen. I'm primarily customer facing in my role, and I hear about this kind of thing all the time. CloudFabrix has moved fast on this. They've just recreated things that they built on the other platform that we're not doing anymore really quickly. And so their knowledge around this, but this is the kind of thing the partner ecosystem can really bring to you guys to help bring all these things together and just make it easier to use and kind of that one pane of glass.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, so by the way, each of these use cases, right, came into being for a need, right? So there was Cisco field telling us that, hey, there is a gap here, right? Can you build an application for kind of bridging this gap, right? That's how it all,
Yeah, and our key, differential table, we can ingest data from the user sources, and we can connect them together. We can enrich the data with one another. So this enrich entire end-to-end network usability, connective data, and observable data can be fed into Splunk and provide a good set of caches.
Okay, well, thank you, Lizzy, and all yours. Okay,
Actually, I wanted to ask one question. Is there a lag between the happening?
Talking about the alerts and stuff, events happening. So we also see a lot of event sources. What I mean is coming from the device class, maybe,
Model, get them somewhere over here. Decision. Short period.
I mean, we have good networking already.
Yeah, but you're right. You can work around it and get close and do some cool things. So that's the important part. But no, I think it's great.
So I've done.
Thanks, man. Thanks. I'm gonna reach out, you know, let's see if we can do something together.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All the hotel data.
All right, I'm gonna probably gonna take off too. I just wanted to see your presentation. Thanks, Shailesh.
Thank you.
That-
Here, let's take a
So that's
picture.
the.
All right, let's do it.
Performance.
I think I'm monitoring for it.
Yeah,
No, before it dries.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, we'll talk to you again soon.
Hey, guys, there it is. Hey, we haven't met on Shailesh.
Hi, David.
David, nice to meet you. You part of the PMT and what?
No, I am a Splunk user. Yeah, customer.
Oh, okay. I think I saw you last time, right?
Yeah, I'm usually good.
Okay,
I'm Jason.
Yes, I was.
So Lizzy is from Studio. I've worked on that framework, which.
What studio?
Okay. So that was.
So you said you go from a customer?
Or- Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, we get GE Vernova. It's Vernova now. It used to be Vernova. That's the general picture. We're on the power side.
So, are they
Regularly? Yeah.
So pretty regularly, and yeah, usually I try to, it all depends on schedule, but yeah.
So it's a little bit
So do you think any of this makes sense to you?
It does, yeah, I haven't been as involved on the data center side, because we started working with other teams that own the data center. And we use ServiceNow for a lot of our CDN usage, and we use Splunk Observability for a lot of projects. But primarily, previously, I was just in the cloud, AWS,
There's
some
all sorts of
Azure.
crazy stuff.
But we are starting to delve into data center where we're using some of their existing tools that they have.
We don't really know what
Because
kind of
it's a bunch
security.
of existing teams that we kind of
environments, et
brought
cetera.
on.
So
And
that's
use things
where
like
Studio is
microfocus,
kind of,
use the
Right.
DB, and I know that's
a
been a
way to
challenge
tackle
with-
it, I suppose.
for us.
So yeah,
to understand
exactly what I was
microfocus.
showing you was
It's very
that,
difficult to
and
understand.
I.
And people know how to understand or. But that's what you're doing.
No, not for me particularly,
And
no.
then we
Uh,
fix all of
I
our.
think, I just think most people should is also.
Oh, I don't work for Splunk, I work for.
Yeah.
I work for a local company.
For the lecture.
Yeah, I'm just here to listen, yeah, see what's going on.
It did, they closed it down.
Closed it down, yeah.
Yeah, so we're all,
Ministers.
Because that's great,
At
right?
my company.
Trying to build something.
yeah,
Multi platform, right?
yeah, it was,
In my opinion, you can do your own.
but it was like their global research center for a period of time, and then, the platform, was called the Predix platform.
Predix platform.
Yeah, that's where I started on there, but now we've moved over kind of like the APM and power center, they keep the whole split of the company. So they split into power, healthcare and education.
What is happening in each company. You bring plastic, you create a layout, and then you see the steps.
Sometimes I get confused. Okay.
So
Yeah,
then
yeah,
you
yeah.
can
Well, we
more
did.
and more.
Yeah, yeah.
Or now everybody's working in an automated way. On the
So who's
network.
gonna-
We did create some
We'll
plastic
book it.
also.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, if you guys show up.
It's pretty cool. Just maybe.
Yeah, you can stay, welcome to stay.
Yeah, so we will be in touch on more of the product management side. So if there is
Oh, my.
any help we need, especially.
Good, right?
Building these apps, can we reach out to you guys?
Yeah, I think so. So you're part of the user groups?
Yeah.
Yeah, I am, but we are more a technology partner, both to Splunk and to Cisco. And right now, we are in the process of developing all the apps.
So it's not-
Is the engineering.
You have
based
different
on
events,
product.
One day,
We
like,
will
how
have
many
some
times do
questions.
you-
Not just one day, so you should be doing 1 to 2 one
So
session
can
in
you
one
reach out
place
to
and then
you guys?
4 o'clock, just we have to go to another.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, yeah.
I went to
Yeah,
the-
but
Yeah, I went to there. Basically, it's.
And then
even
things like
though
looks it
just
up
in
every
one
time.
place,
My email is just
already
Jimmy
it's-
H.
Yeah.
at Splunk.com.
Wow, which one do you like better?
Hey, Maggie? Is usually this salty? Pizzas, the pizzas, are they very salty?
Was it salty?
Yeah, the veggie at least.
Oh,
Yep.
I don't know, I had the chicken from Dunkin' Donuts.
Sounds good, sounds good. Yeah, and if it's not, interrupts my game, I'll give it forward for like a course.
The name sounds super familiar.
Oh, Becky, I think it's, he was also, hosting the.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Yahoo.
That's the open.
Yeah, Yahoo Mail. The name sounds so familiar, but I heard it's just.
You did record.
It's not, it's I'm having a hard time like driving my car.
Yeah.
You as well?
Yeah.
In general, when
Is
you.
that in the area?
Yeah.
You end up doing like knowing all that?
Yeah.
So I can't remember if it's just that I know that or if I'm.
He went, so he was, our intern in our cybersecurity group, and we introduced him to Splunk.
Yeah,
And
I'm
he
gonna look them up on LinkedIn.
really liked it, and we ended up here for a period of time.
Oh, yeah.
The name sounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you'll look like, say, the other job, better known.
He's actually,
Or is he not at it?
well, he just moved over to aviation. I don't talk to him, but, well, I still.
Yeah.
I think it's fine. We'll just
We'll
pass it
hand it
on.
off, yeah.
Hey, Rohit, how are you? Good. Looks very exciting time for you.
Yeah.
Lot of work will be done. Or be like you are Splunk-ify everything.
I don't know.
You are Splunk. Looks like now.
So, internally we're using open source. So the SQL to query is very similar to open source.
Oh, that's why they just easily do. You already have data knowledge.
Oh, wait. There we go. Excellent. And then trust.
Oh, so there was a question for you in the chat.
Oh,
That is this demo accessible to us?
well,
And
yeah. there is a
neighbor
recorded
next
demo.
door,
What is it?
next door. But do they have access to the demo?
No, I understand him and give. Recording. Nick is the guy from us.
No, that was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, give money.
Okay, can you drop it? So.
Oh,
I did.
Or if you click the three dots, you can just hide that.
Oh, you can?
Yeah, hide reading that. Or hide floating.
Wow, I learned something new today.
How do you show it?
Probably,
What do you mean?
Zoom.
Yeah, hold it back.
Oh, press escape, it'll come back.
I think just move your browser. I think
Or
that's it.
it'll come back, don't worry.
Yeah, that's okay. We don't need those.
Yeah, right.
I also learned something.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So we'll get started. I put this here because we are going to talk about a couple of features that are in development that haven't been released yet. So, can't guarantee any timelines. Everything is subject to change, yada, yada, yada. But we're excited to talk about what's new in Dashboard Studio. So for today, I'll be presenting here with Jimmy. I think I've met a couple of you before, but my name is Lizzy. I am the product manager for dashboards at Splunk. So that's both the classic dashboards as well as Dashboard Studio.
And my name is Jimmy. I am the product manager on Dashboard Framework, and we support the underlying framework under a lot of the dashboard building inside of Splunk, and Dashboard Studio is one of our closest partners.
You probably want mic so people can hear you also.
I am actually asking people if they can hear you.
It's okay, I'll grab it next time. we speak.
Okay, thank you.
I promise we'll hand off after this. So today, a couple of things that we want to cover are new features that were released. So just in case for anyone who's on-prem, we'll cover things that are new in 9.2 as well as 9.3, which is the most recent release from earlier this year. And actually, yesterday, we launched a new cloud release, and so there are new features from that we're excited to talk about and showcase for you as well. And then Jimmy will dive into what is Dashboard Framework, talk a little bit about how you might be able to leverage that, since that's a package that like Dashboard Studio builds on top of Dashboard Framework. ITSI Glass Tables is built on top of Dashboard Framework and is publicly available so that if you wanted to develop with it, you can as well. And then we included a couple of tips. We actually presented something very similar at .com that we got a lot of positive feedback about on how to make the most out of Dashboard Studio. There are a lot of really, I think, interesting tips and tricks that are a little bit hidden, so we want to surface those here and walk through them. We did not prepare a demo for today, but if we have time at the end and we want to get wild, we will just ad hoc do a live demo, take a look at whatever you want. So feel free to ask us questions along the way. And if there's anything in particular you'd like to see at the end, just let us know. Okay. Oh, the other thing I wanted to point out is, so this is a dashboard that we showcase at our booth at .com. So it's using a combination of a lot of our latest features. There's a lot of custom core plus SVGs. As you can see, we have some animation that's built into it as well. And then as we're like clicking through these ponies at the top of the screen, you can see that everything is dynamically updating. It's using a combination of a lot of the show hide capabilities that were released in 9.1. So nice and flashy, and I wanted to show it off again because we thought it looked pretty cool. Okay, so this is the what's new portion. So for 9.2, just in case, I wanted to recap because I know sometimes for on-prem it can take a while to upgrade. So some of the key things that we added were trellis for single value visualization. So that's single value icon, single value radial. And before you ask, yes, line chart, bar chart, all of those others are on the roadmap to add trellis support for as well. We added the drill down link capabilities to search and reports. So now all of the drill down links that you have in classic dashboards are also available in Dashboard Studio. Basically, the only thing that is left that is still missing is the kind of eval capabilities for tokens when you're setting tokens. There are workarounds to achieve that. We can talk about that later today if that's something that you are interested in, but otherwise that is also something on the roadmap, and that's kind of the last gap that we have as it pertains to interactions and drill downs. We had workflow actions for events viewers, so another interaction-based thing. So if you have any workflow actions set up to work in search or as part of enterprise security, now those will also translate and work in your studio dashboards as well. We added an expandable code editor. So if you've ever tried to modify the source code in Dashboard Studio and you've tried to do it in that tiny little box in the right-hand corner, there is now a button to expand the code editor. It will take up the full width of the canvas. You can expand it, and then similar to before, as you make edits in that source code, you'll see it reflected live in the canvas.
There's a question on Zoom.
Oh.
It says, do you want to read it or?
Yeah.
I can read it.
Yeah.
Any news on exporting tables to CSV using Studio?
Oh yeah, so the question, I'll just repeat it, is about exporting tables to CSV in Dashboard Studio. So yes, that's supported. We added that actually back in 9.1. And one improvement we made in Dashboard Studio for exporting over classic dashboards is that if your table is powered by a chain search or post-process search, you can still export those results as well. So that was a limitation we had in classic that we were able to overcome in Dashboard Studio. And then the last one that I want to highlight is our classic to studio conversion report. One of the things that we're working on is really improving the logic and capabilities we have for taking an existing classic dashboard, taking whatever visualizations, inputs, data sources, and configurations you have, and converting that over into a studio dashboard so you don't have to start from scratch. You have a good baseline of all the content you've already created. One of the challenges we had before is you would convert and then you were doing your best guess at what would actually converted and what things might have been dropped because they weren't supported yet in Studio. Now you will have a report that will give you an explicit list of every configuration or option that wasn't converted. If there are any recommendations on things that you can do to modify it, and otherwise a learn more link that will take you to the documentation so you can see if there's any other suggestions on how to work around those limitations, as well as just to look more at what is included in this conversion experience. There are a couple of miscellaneous other things as well that we won't touch on, but if you visit our documentation, we have a what's new page, and we always categorize all of the new features that are listed there specifically for Dashboard Studios, and sometimes there can be a lot. We don't want to overwhelm the overall enterprise release notes. For 9.3, we are really excited about these, and I think this wasn't out at Conf yet, so we weren't able to talk about it at .conf yet, but the biggest one is being able to do scheduled email export for Dashboard Studio, as well as having API support for triggering those exports. The most important piece that I want to call out here is the fact that we're actually maintaining the dashboard layout now. So if anyone has ever tried to export a classic dashboard, you know that it kind of decomposes the dashboard, so you can't actually get the context of how these panels relate to each other. But in Dashboard Studio, you'll now be able to do that, and of course, we'll maintain your styling and theming. So if you have, dark mode or anything like that, that'll be maintained. Also, another improvement we made is adding support for tokens. So if your dashboard is like a form, it has inputs, or has any default tokens that are specified in the dashboard, in Classic, you couldn't do this. You had to make sure everything was kind of hard-coded. In Dashboard Studio, we'll take whatever the default value is for those tokens, and we'll run the searches accordingly. This includes any tokens that you set from search results. We can also take those and then continue to pass those through the search and then have those populate in the dashboard as well. So a couple of things that we are really excited for. And then we also added the ability to have multiple interactions on a visualization. So I think this is something also you could already do in Classic if you went to source code, you have multiple event handlers. So now if you wanted to do something like, hey, when I click on this, I want it to A, set a bunch of tokens, and then B, also drill down and link to another dashboard and pass tokens through that. You can now do that in Dashboard Studio. We have UI to specify those multiple interactions, as well as to reorder them so that you can specify the order in which you want those to execute. So if you wanted to set a bunch of tokens first and then take those tokens and pass them into a URL, for example, you can now make sure that they execute in that order. Along the lines of tokens, we've made it possible to share tokens between inputs and interactions. So if you have a drop down at the top and you make a selection, and then later when someone is clicking on something on the dashboard, you want to set the same token and have that drop down update, that will now work in Dashboard Studio. So you can have that connection. So especially if you're building dashboards for other end users who may not be as familiar with how Splunk works, and you want to have that more intuitive experience that as you're changing the filter, it's actually reflected in the top, you can now have that achievable with Dashboard Studio. And the last one seems really small, but we got this request so many times that I thought it was important to list it here, which is that you can now change the color of your panel title and description. It's something that, yeah, it feels like it's really small, but it's really amazing how many people have asked for it. So wanted to add it here. Okay, now the exciting stuff. So this is part of the release that was just launched yesterday. You can expect this to be rolled into what the next on-prem release is going to contain. And the most important one that we want to call out is the ability to now have tabs within dashboards. We've seen this in a number of classic dashboards where people are wiring up custom JavaScript. Usually it's that one particular example that I think everyone references and then modifies to be able to put in their dashboard. I know there's a lot of overhead that's related to that, being able to maintain it, being able to make sure only the searches that are on the tab that you're looking at are executing at a given time. But all of that is now handled natively in Dashboard Studio. And so again, we can have an ad hoc demo at the end of this to take a look at it, but there's UI that will allow you to add as many tabs as you want. You can specify different layout types for each of those. You can share visualizations or inputs across each of the tabs. We will manage all of the search execution. So for example, the first tab you load, we will only run the searches for that tab, and we won't run any other searches until you navigate to those tabs. Then we will cache the results, so should you go back to a tab rather than running all the searches again, we'll have the results from whatever you were looking at before. So a couple of really exciting things related to that. And then there are additional enhancements that we're continuing to work on that will be coming in future releases as well.
Question. So if you have an input to that dashboard, will it be shared across all the tabs or it's each tab?
Yeah, so you can choose that. So you can choose to have an input. So the question was, if we have an input on a dashboard, is it shared across the tabs? And so you have a choice. You can have a global input that's at the top, and so no matter which tab you're on, you'll see that input at the top. Or you can move an input into an individual canvas, and it will only show on that tab, but the token that is set by that input, you can still use across all the other tabs.
I'm sorry, did you say if you could use chain searches within the tabs, like you have like global search and then in the tabs you chain?
Yeah, the question was if we can use chain searches with tabs, so yes, you can.
Okay.
Anything that you could do previously, you can do still with tabs.
Okay.
Two other things that I want to call out. So we added support for single value radial gauge. I actually forgot to type the word gauge in there, but so now if you have a single value radial and you want to apply a gauge, it's more similar to the radial gauge visualization. So you are able to now apply thresholds, specify different colors for those thresholds, and specify a different min and max that you want rather than 0 to 100. And finally, the clone from examples hub. So we try to provide new example dashboards out of the box with most releases. And what we've heard from a lot of customers is these are really great examples. I would like to use them. It's a pain in the ass to go in and like manually click and drag to highlight to be able to copy and paste the full source code into a new dashboard. So we have a new button now that you just click clone in Studio. It will grab that whole definition for you. You pick the app in which you want it to land, whatever name you want, and then you are off to the races from there. So hopefully a small quality of life improvement that will make it easier to leverage those examples in the examples hub. So with that, let me pause and see if there's any questions about the things that are new. Otherwise, I'm going to hand it off to Jimmy to talk about dashboard framework.
I want it seemed like, you said 9.3, for the scheduled dashboards, you said you took the default value. So that's pretty cool because so many times we want to send it for classic, we want to send out a dashboard, we had to pick the time frame, right? Otherwise it wouldn't work. So that's what that is, and you get to choose. Okay.
Yeah, so in addition to the time frame, like if you have a dashboard that has inputs in it,
Yeah.
or you have any other tokens that you're using and you've set a default value, or even tokens that are being set from search results that you need to use throughout the dashboard to populate, you can now still schedule those as well. So one of the big benefits is then right after someone looks at the static snapshot of it, if they want to go and dig into the dashboard itself, they can actually go dig into that dashboard directly. I've seen a couple of customers where they had like an interactive dashboard and then a static version of it so that they could schedule it and send email reports of the static ones. But now you can just have it all as one because you'll be able to send that.
Cool.
Yeah,
Nice.
cool.
The examples you mentioned, they're in the Dashboard Studio examples app, is that what? And is
The
that
examples?
automatic? Yeah, you're referencing examples of the clone thing.
Oh, yeah. I'll be happy to show that at the end. So once we get through the rest of our slides, I'll note that down for our ad hoc live demo.
Alright, hey everyone, my name is Jimmy, and I am just here to give a brief introduction about Dashboard Framework before going back to Studio. So Dashboard Framework, we are a modern React-based dashboarding framework that is used internally within Splunk to create dashboarding tools. And you probably have seen Dashboard Studio is one of our main consumers, but we also power a number of other partners as well, such as ITSI, enterprise security, and mobile. And combined with Splunk-ify visualizations, we make up Splunk-ify Toolkit. And Splunk-ify Toolkit enables developers to build custom Splunk applications when out-of-box Splunk solutions don't quite meet the needs and requirements. So this usually entails things that are heavy on customization, so custom layouts, custom visualizations, custom interactions, etc. That is kind of the main use case that you could potentially use Dashboard Framework for. And going down the list here, just a little quick rundown. Splunk-UI is a library of React components based on Splunk's design systems. So these are the singular buttons, texts, modals, etc. And visualizations, of course, is a library of visualizations that include your favorite diagrams and charts. So things like line, bar, Sankey diagrams, etc. That's all in the visualizations package. And finally, we are dashboard frameworks. So we are the underlying framework of how dashboards are built and viewed. So we are the inner workings kind of behind dashboard definitions. So connecting data sources with visualizations, then rendering them on the dashboard. That is kind of the role of dashboard framework. And if you want to get started or try building with dashboard framework, you can visit us at Splunk-ify.splunk.com. There is a get started sections in dashboard framework or the rest of suite as well, so Splunk UI toolkit. Also in the documentations, there is an examples gallery to see what you can potentially build with dashboard framework and the rest of Splunk UI toolkit. So for example here, there is a flight picker example. So everything you can kind of see from the dropdown, it is very custom because there are things like nested dropdowns and things that we don't necessarily support. I won't comment on the design of it, but you can also see there is like a pricing selector and toggles, and this is all nested within a dropdown. And also the heat map itself is also a custom visualization. So if you want to either build your own visualizations or bring in other third-party visualization packages, you can use that in conjunction with dashboard framework. And yeah, one of the recent releases that propagated from dashboard framework is tabs. And honestly, I was going to talk a little bit more about the performance and everything, but Lizzy already covered it pretty comprehensively. But things like tabs about dashboards, taking a step back, dashboard framework we release on a 6-week cadence, and we are not tied with Splunk Core or enterprise versions. So hypothetically, you could be months or even years ahead just based on the release schedule of or the upgrade schedule of your enterprise. So if you want to be at the forefront of whatever dashboard framework releases, you can try us out getting started at the previous documentation page at Splunk-ify.splunk.com. And in the future, some of the future things we are potentially working on. So this is a conditional evaluation for tokens. And this is going to be, at first, it's only going to be applied for conditional visibility. So deciding what you are showing and what you're hiding in the dashboard with more complex conditions built in rather than just if data is available or if it's not. And this is an example. So that in this case, there is a UI where you're able to kind of build it by hand, or there is also an option to do it with SPL if that is the preference. So we are also exploring into other use cases that we can apply conditional evaluations to for tokens specifically. So we are partnering very closely with Studio to listen to how we can help Dashboard Studio achieve feature parity with simple XML. And yeah, it's been a great relationship so far, and we're just really excited to keep up with it. And if you have any questions, if you want to build with Dashboard Framework, if you run into any problems or questions while trying it out, feel free to reach out to us on web platform at splunk.com through email, or you can reach out to me directly at Jimmy Huang on our user groups Slack channel. And yeah, I'll be here to answer a few questions. If there are not any, I can go ahead and pass it back to Lizzy for more studio stuff. We'll start left to right.
Do the DAP dashboards have any impact on my SVCs?
The question was whether tab dashboards have any impact on your SVCs. So it really depends on how many searches that you're running. So same rules apply to a non-tab dashboard. It's about trying to optimize your searches and how many you need to run. Because we will only execute the searches that are on that first page when you load it, potentially it will actually help with some, I don't know, but I don't think it'll necessarily help with SVCs, but it can help with some of the performance aspect because you're trying to execute a lot less searches up front. But at the end of the day, if your dashboard has 100 searches spread across 10 tabs and you go and click on every one of them, we're going to run all 10 of those and it'll consume the same amount of SVCs as if you had them all on one.
And go ahead. What's the development experience like working with the Splunk UI toolkit? Let's say I have a laptop. Do I need a Splunk Enterprise backing to run and develop things in, or is there some kind of like standalone test system?
Gotcha. So, how this works, so I'm not 100% familiar with this, the whole developer experience. But I believe that, you do need a local enterprise instance running, and you're able to run it locally in a installed app that way. I believe that is the case.
Thank you.
That was gonna be my same question.
Okay, awesome.
Does it rely on Splunk to run? Like, does it have to run inside Splunk as a, like, Splunk app?
So I actually I do not believe it needs to run inside of Splunk. So if you wanted to deploy it as its own application, I believe you could also do so.
Yeah. Better to double check, because if that's the case, probably you don't need a Splunk enterprise to.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. It's just based on my developer experience. So when I set it up, it wasn't
Yeah,
necessarily.
probably it's easier if you already have Splunk.
Right. Cool. All right. In that case, I'll pass it back to Lizzy, and we are back on studio.
Thank you, Jimmy. And I've started taking notes on things people want to see, so let me know if there's anything else that comes up and we will take a look at that. So tips and tricks, and feel free to let me know that you already know this and you want me to skip along, or if there's something that you haven't seen before and you would like to dig in a little more, we can take this wherever you'd like to go. So the first thing that I see with a lot of customers who are using classic dashboards is a lot of feedback around not having the ability to use custom CSS or custom HTML panels to be able to modify the look and feel of the dashboard. So one of the things I wanted to touch on was just the fact that there are a number of use cases that we see people using CSS and HTML for that are natively supported. And you can see them listed here. I won't go through to detail all of them, but largely having to do with like layout, selecting the colors you want, so on and so forth, being able to insert text and images. There are a number of use cases where it's still, you would still need custom CSS, but we don't currently support it in Dashboard Studio. And that largely comes when you want to start doing things like modifying the font sizes within your visualizations, or wanting to modify anything that has to do with like the wrapper around the canvas. So you want to do something to modify how the app nav bar looks so it matches your colors or your company colors or anything like that. Those things are still not supported. We do recognize that those are important use cases though, so we're considering how to address those in the future, but at least for the time being, for anything that's kind of inside the dashboard canvas, there's actually a large amount of the use cases that we are able to achieve with CSS and HTML. So a lot of times when I get the question, hey, do you support HTML or CSS or even JavaScript? I usually like to first ask back, what exactly are you trying to do? Because a lot of times what you're trying to do is something that we do support. Another case in point is with like the tab dashboards, right? I've had customers say, I need custom JavaScript. I do a lot of heavy custom JavaScript in my dashboard so I can modify this layout. And then we show them like, hey, actually you can do that natively, and then it kind of becomes a moot point. Not to say, of course, that there aren't use cases we won't be able to handle, but our hope is that for the like 80% of use cases, so something that's very common that we know a lot of people will benefit from, some other examples off the top of my head, being able to insert like a custom tooltip. So when you hover, you can put whatever text or content you want. That's a very common use case that we think a lot of people would benefit from. And so that's a great candidate for something that we would be looking to support natively in Dashboard Studio. Of course, we'll eventually get to a point where there will be a lot of niche use cases and people are going to think of things that we either won't have the capacity to really support, or just not enough people are going to need it, that it's going to be something we prioritize in product. And so we do obviously still need a path to being able to support those custom use cases. And again, that's where looking at the dashboard framework is a great option, because you have the freedom to do whatever you want there. The second thing that I wanted to talk about was conditional panel visibility. So for those of you who have used Dashboard Studio, have you had a chance to use conditional panel visibility yet? Somewhat. Does anyone do this in classic dashboards today? Okay. So I think something like this looks kind of familiar, right? Where you have a couple of different places where you may be setting tokens and unsetting tokens, and then using depends and rejects and a bunch of other panels and trying to manage all of that to make sure that the right panels are showing at the right time and hiding at the right time. And all of that is done in source code and of course, throughout multiple places in the source code. What we heard from a lot of customers is that 80% of the time, you just want to hide the panel until there is something to show. So a lot of times it's a table that you're showing more details and you don't need to populate that until a user has gone through and selected, something else on a chart. So to address that 80% use case, what we first started with, and this was released in 9.1, there's a checkbox on any panel now that you can say, when there's no data to show, hide this panel. So it eliminates all of that token management that you need to do in the back end and making sure that you're setting and unsetting properly, there's nothing conflicting, and that you don't have to have like the various depends and rejects in your panels. You can now just check this, and if there's no data to show, we hide the panel. So what this means is today, this being the primary use case that we're solving, there are workarounds if you have more complex logic that you need to use, which is basically more or less to put that logic into your SPL. So basically forcing the SPL to return no results if you want the panel to be hidden under those certain conditions. As Jimmy was showing before, we are working on designs that will allow you to specify that custom logic outside of your SPL and purely just as part of the conditional panel visibilities that will help to in a more streamlined and efficient way address that use case. And then in the examples hub, and I know you had a question about it, so I'll show you how to navigate to the examples hub later when we get to our demo. But we have an example in there for kind of that more advanced use case where there's a very specific set of conditions that you want to have be met in order to determine the panel's visibility. And so you can see how that is set up with this example in the examples hub. Any questions? One other thing I do want to call out, as you know, Dashboard Studio has two layouts, absolute and grid layout. So we do support conditional panel visibility in both, but the behavior of the disappearing panel is a little bit different in the two. In absolute layout, because the whole purpose of absolute is to let you choose exactly where you want to put the panel and how big you want it to be, when a panel disappears, we won't rearrange the layout around it. So it'll just disappear, and if you have nothing else there, it might look like there's a gap in your dashboard. In grid layout, however, because it's a more responsive layout, if you hide a panel, then all the other panels around it will adjust to fill that space. So depending on what kind of interaction you're looking for, that's something to consider when you're starting to build out your dashboards.
Lizzy, there's a question. So one is, there's a bug in 9.2 where search action, the magnifying glass, when you click that, it launches a new search instead of rendering the SID of the existing panel. Has this been fixed in 9.3?
That's a great question. I have heard of that bug. I will have to double check if that was fixed in 9.3. If you don't mind slacking me on the user group Slack, I can follow up with you afterwards, and I'll make a note of that right now. The next use case is around setting tokens for search. So in Classic, does anybody do this today? Okay. So again, then for those of you who do this, I think this looks probably pretty familiar, right? So you're going into the source code, you're specifying some event handler, whether that's in progress or done. Then you want to set or eval or condition match a token value. And then you specify the token value or the token name you want to use, and you specify either the piece of job metadata or field result that you want to display in the token, and then you can go and use that token and pass it throughout the dashboard. In Dashboard Studio, all you have to do is check this checkbox on your data source, and then you use the following syntax that you see here, which is whatever the search name is, it's case sensitive. So in this case, it would be capital A activity by lowercase source type, a colon, and then either result.the field name or job.metadata. So again, you don't have to go into the source code, and you don't have to do this extra manipulation where you're taking the results from one search and then passing that to some custom token name that you've created. Instead, it will always be tied directly to that search. And you can just now, once you check this checkbox, you can now use this token throughout the dashboard. You can use it in other searches, you can use it in panel titles, just as you would with any other token. So again, another thing that we're looking at, what are people trying to achieve in classic dashboards, and is there a way that we can streamline it and make it a lot easier to use in Dashboard Studio? So hopefully these are things that help to make some of these common use cases a little bit more straightforward and save you a little bit of time with having to manage more of the token stuff in source.
Do you recall which version the set tokens from search was introduced?
Yeah, the question is when this set tokens from search was introduced. I believe it was 9.1.
Another question about tab dashboards. Nick is saying I'm not seeing the tabbed options in the new examples. Where can I find that?
Oh, where can you find the tabs in the new examples? Are you referring, Nick, are you referring to the examples hub?
I'm asking to go off mute.
Or if you can go off mute and of the voice of God. Okay. If you're asking about tabbed examples in the examples hub, we don't currently have a dashboard that has multiple tabs. However, we have updated all of the examples in the examples hub so that their layout matches the new schema that's needed for tab dashboard. So that is something you'll notice when you upgrade to a version of Splunk that has tab dashboards. There will be an auto migration of your dashboard definition to match the new layout schema, which now supports, obviously multiple canvases.
Can you tell, what is that header? That could be 1.2 or something. Version 1.2, the XML.
It's not something in the XML, it's purely in the JSON. We can take a look at that as well in the demo, but it's specifically just in the layout stanza, if I'm correct, yeah.
Yes.
So specifically just in the layout stanza where previously you would just have, okay, for my layout, I have this, it's this type, absolute or grid layout, here's the size, and here's like where all of the objects should be located and what their sizes should be. Now you'll have kind of this extra section which says, okay, I have this many tabs, here are my tab IDs, and then there'll be sections for each of those tab IDs, which will then have that same content. What is the layout type? What's the position of all the items on that tab? Okay. And then the last thing I wanted to call it was dashboard defaults. This is something that only exists in source code today in Dashboard Studio. So at least when we were at .conf, we found out that a lot of people aren't aware that this exists. So I wanted to touch on it. Is there anyone who is already familiar with the concept of defaults in Dashboard Studio? Okay, great, perfect. That's what we want. So I'm glad that we're bringing this up. So you may have scenarios where you have multiple visualizations. Let's say you have multiple single values and you want them to all have the same options. Like you want them all to follow the same coloring threshold. Or you have a bunch of searches and you want them to all follow the same time range, or you want them to refresh on the same schedule. In dashboard, sorry, I see you straightening. We can also show this in the demo as well. Let me write that down. So we can take a look at what the source code really looks like. But in the source code, in the dashboard definition, there is a section called defaults, which will allow you to specify the default options or configurations that you want to apply to objects in your dashboards. Today, this applies to your data sources, visualizations, and tokens. So this is where you could say, hey, for a given token, I always want the default value to be, XYZ. For visualizations, this can be things like I want all my single values to have a background color of like red if it's over 100 and green if it's less than 100. And then for data sources, like I mentioned, it can be like time range or like refresh rate related. Within these defaults, you can specify a global setting. So let's talk about visualizations first. As an example, let's say on all of your visualizations, you want to show the last updated time. This is something where you could say, I want a global setting that for all my visualizations, last updated time. But maybe for whatever reason, you have like a table visualization that you don't want to show it on. You can also specify, hey, just for tables, I would like this different set of default configurations. And the more specific that you get, those options will override something that's more global. When you specify something in the default section, let's say single values, you specify the background colors that you want. When you actually go to look at a single value on the dashboard and you look at the source code, you'll see these default options populated there already. If you choose to override it, and you can, we will use whatever those new options are that you've specified, and we'll ignore what the defaults are using whatever your specified options are. So that if you ever want to go back to using the defaults, it's just a matter of clearing that out from the source code so that it knows to go back and reference the defaults. So we've seen a lot of customers where you have a lot of visualizations, you want them to look the same, and people are either doing that by manually adjusting that, which is very tedious, or trying to clone multiple times the same visualization after you get the configuration that you want to try to copy it over. If you already have a search attached to it, you know it creates duplicate searches, and sometimes that's also a pain to then go back and have to clean up. So this is a great way to like very quickly add the same options to multiple visualizations. And if we have time to do a quick demo, I can also show how to use the combination of the UI and the source to make it as quick as possible to take that whatever the source code that's generated and apply it across the board.
So is that dashboard defaults in 9.1?
Yes, this has been available actually since 8.2.
Can you apply that across multiple dashboards? So you have like a common theme across multiple dashboards in the app or something?
Great question. Currently, no. Currently, the defaults are specific just to the given dashboard, but that is something that we have heard that I want to apply the same styling across multiple dashboards. So that is a use case we're considering for the future. Yeah.
Ideas I can +1, 2.
I would have to check on Splunk ideas if that's there, but we'll definitely, I'll make sure to also note that one down.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to answer it. At the conference, there was it called the Innovation Lab? I don't know if I'm allowed to mention it, but there was something in the future where basically it would do a git diff of your dashboards. Is that something that's still coming? Do you know?
Yes, so the question was around basically kind of version history for dashboards. It was something that was shown at the dashboard, the innovation labs at .conf, and yes, that is something that is in development.
Okay.
Yeah. The caveat is the UI is currently only available for Dashboard Studio.
Okay.
Yeah, but basically how it'll work is on every save of any XML file, we will persist a new version every time you save. So the version history for all your files will be available, just as far as having the UI that will actually let you do like a visual comparison is just going to be Dashboard Studio in the first release.
And on-prem or
Yep,
enterprise?
yep. The other thing is for the first iteration, it will also be limited to single standalone search heads. And then the plan is to roll it out to be available for search and clusters later. And then before anyone else, we also plan to eventually support other knowledge objects as well.
Yeah.
That's always the next question that we get.
Oh.
You had a question? Did you also have a question? Yeah.
I have other ones only.
Okay. Sounds good. Oh, well, perfect timing.
Okay. I always ask this, I think we were at the conf, and I asked this there is, do you have guidance on just UX design that is available, or is that something you're thinking about providing in general? Because we have a lot of people who build dashboards, and sometimes they build them really poorly. They'll just put like tons of visualizations in one dashboard where you're scrolling,
Yeah.
and it's slow sometimes, and there's not a great way to design it. Like they should be breaking those things up.
Yeah.
And I try and provide some of that guidance. I'm not a UX person in general, it's just like think best practices that I've come across. But is that something that you're thinking about like presenting in a way?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question was about providing guidance or best practices for dashboard design. We have a couple of blog posts that provide some high-level best practices, but to be honest, that's kind of the extent of what we have so far. So I can send those to you at least as a reference to start. So if you Slack me and just remind me about that, I can find those and send those links to you. But otherwise, this definitely is a pain point that we have heard before. So yeah, I think it's definitely something we can do enablement wise to try to provide more, more guidance on how many visualizations should you put, how should you structure it? And so some of those high level things are captured in the blog post, like how do you think through what should be there and what should be at the top? How do you lay them out? How should you go from like more overview type, like KPIs into then more detailed line charts or tables below?
We could just put it in the user group. Slack channel.
Oh, the blog?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
I
sure.
think a bunch of us would be interested.
Okay, sure, yeah. Let me got that down too. Any other questions? Or are we just eager to look at
More forward thinking ones, if you thought about adding the ability to have like an image or an icon gallery, uploading things almost similar to like what you do in PowerPoint or OmniGraffle, where you can use those to then recreate dashboard design or like flow charts or things like that. Is that something that you guys have been thinking about?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it's about having an icon or image gallery. So we do have a number of icons that we provide out of the box. I think the challenge beyond that and providing other icons or images is where we source them from and associated licensing with that. But I think to address kind of another point I think you touched on, which is I want to be able to take a look at something and kind of replicate it and reuse it, like if it's a flow chart or something like that. So something we are looking at is, as I already mentioned, one is providing more examples. So just as we hear more use cases and we see more common dashboard layouts, providing generic examples of that you can leverage. And then extending that into starting to think about templates. So similar, also kind of going back to the other problem of how do I lay out a good dashboard, we can provide you a couple of templates, similar to PowerPoint, right? You have a bunch of different slide options you can pick from that give you an idea like, hey, okay, here's a 2 content column kind of slide, providing something like that also so that you can say, okay, I want a dashboard that is gonna have a couple key KPIs at the top and will be structured in a certain way. And then with the new Clone in Studio feature we have from the Examples Hub, you'd be able to just take that template and then put it into a new dashboard. So that's something that we are looking at doing that might help to get closer to addressing what you're looking for. But otherwise, like just generally for images, what we recommend and is also what we do when we're doing demos is to look at some of those websites like Unsplash or Pixabay that have like free to use images.
Last one, there was a reference of the Innovation Studio where you have versioning for dashboards. We do our own kind of versioning where we store everything you get. One thing that would be great is our ability to download the file for the dashboard, because even the code isn't the same as the actual file because it doesn't have that encapsulating JSON in there. So a lot of times we'll build it on something like our on-prem, copy the file that's there and put it in a Git.
Yeah.
Is that something that you're thinking would be available? We've seen that for like data models. You can download the JSON for that.
Yeah, two possibilities. So one is for today, if you also use the APIs and you hit the data UI views endpoint, then you can pull the whole XML and it will include the JSON inside the XML. So that's one way that you could do that today. Otherwise, I know that's something that's on the team that's working on version history. Something that's on their roadmap is also to hook into an external Git so that you can, if you have it already set up, now we can kind of have that integration between Splunk and whatever your Git.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Yeah. You have a question?
Yeah, it's sort of similar to his question regarding, so I haven't used Dashboard Studio too much, but I know if I recall correctly, like images are uploaded to the KB store. Is there does Dashboard Studio currently let you see what has been uploaded in terms of images already?
Yeah, great question. So the question is around images when they get uploaded to Dashboard Studio, that they're stored in KB Store, which is still the case, but something that we are on our roadmap looking to change because it's kind of a pain having images in the KB Store, harder to package with your dashboards. If you wanted to move your dashboards as part of an app, right, you don't have it available to you there. So that's something in general that we're looking to change. And then to the second question of some way to be able to view all the images that have been previously uploaded. Currently, we don't have an image viewer, but that is also as part of this future improvement to our image storage is thinking about how do we make it easier for you to see what's already there so you can see what you might be able to reuse rather than having to upload more images.
Is there any plans to just replace KB Store with whatever you're looking at for the like bundling as an app?
I would say we're looking at using a different solution for our image storage, but Splunk as a whole, I can't comment on their plans for KB store. Okay,
One more question.
yeah.
Sometimes I've used I forget what it's called, the knowledge objects page that lists every single thing in order to search for stuff and find dashboards, how many use this, how many have that sort of thing. I used the API that returns the XML. This is for classic dashboards, but I assume it would be the same. I used that and built a system that lets me externally do analytics, or, do migrations, to make changes, like let's say some field name changed or something. Do you have any kind of anticipations of user interfaces that let you manage the collection of dashboards in some way? Maybe a list them or search in them or
Yeah.
anything like that?
I don't have something very specifically that we've mapped out, but I would be interested to learn more about like what the common use cases are that you are like trying to find.
I'll
So
give a simple one. User says, hey, I want to build a dashboard for my KPIs. I say, great. And then I come back and user has built a dashboard with 160 panels with the cross product of every field. So I need to go retrieve that, process that down to something that has a couple of pull downs in it. But I don't know because all I see is a mess, right? So I need to get that XML out and process it and turn it into a new dashboard, right? So basically knowledge management about what dashboards are doing.
yeah, okay. Something that we've been looking at is kind of a dashboard of dashboards where you'd be able to see.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, so you'd be able to see things like which dashboards are executing the most number of searches or the most expensive searches.
Yeah, or for me, like, which ones are using this deprecated field?
Okay. Yeah. That is a very interesting use case.
Good use case for AI.
Yeah.
Absolutely, that's.
Yeah, and the kind of thing, you want to retire an index.
Yeah.
You want, who's built dashboards using that index?
Yeah, did a lot of things with just a little Python program, pull it down and then run through
Yeah.
some XSLT to, get rid of that and so on.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, those are really good example use cases. I don't
You were
think.
saying LLM integration.
Yeah.
I did do that. I did something that found things about queries and so on.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't currently have something on the roadmap for that, but it's a great use case that you bring, so definitely I can bring that to my team.
We've used a lot of the stuff in the cloud monitoring console because we're in Splunk Cloud. So I don't know if that's available on-prem. That does provide you with like expensive searches, and then it'll identify if it's a safe search, if it's a dashboard. And then we use that to drill down. It'll provide you with the actual search. So then you can look at like keywords.
I'm talking about static analysis.
Okay, yeah.
So analysis of the content of the searches.
Right,
In
right.
dashboards, that type of.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good use case though. Thank you for bringing that. How are we on time? We are out of time. Okay.
I'm just folks want to say that watch the demo because they made the driver, it's up to the.
I can also post screenshots and things like that into the user group Slack as a follow-up.
How many minutes of demo?
I was just gonna, I think I can probably do it in like 5 to 10 minutes if people want to stick around for that. Okay. And then if there is more you want to see, definitely just follow up with me on Slack and I'd be happy to dig in more. Okay. So let me see. We wanted to look at tabs, examples hub, and defaults. So actually, let me start with the examples hub. So if you're on your listing page, in the very top resource card here, called Examples for Dashboard Studio.
I always ignore that.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I know Splunk, I don't need to pay attention to that.
Yeah, so if you click on this examples hub link, what it will do is bring you here, and then for all of the different, at the top, we'll highlight any new examples that we've released in the most recent release. So in this case, it's 2 new example dashboards. Otherwise, as you go through, what you'll see is for every visualization type, and let me just kind of scroll down, you can see different visualizations for them, or sorry, different examples for each of them. Sometimes they're broken out across multiple, so let's take a look at like advanced table formatting, for example. You will see the SPL that we use, the source code, what it looks like, and then, what it actually looks like when it's, rendered. So, and this is available for all of the visualizations, all of the inputs, all of the data source types, all of the different interactions we support as well. So if you wanted to set tokens, use tokens from search, which we talked about. This is the workaround that I was saying. If you have like eval token use cases, how do you embed that into your SPL? And it could be something like you create a new search, it's a make result search, and its sole purpose is to do the token eval work. You basically take whatever the results are and use that set tokens as search as we were showing before, and use that as your way to basically populate the token you want to use throughout the dashboard, and the advanced show and hide dashboard that we were talking about before. And at the very bottom, we provide a collection of complete dashboards. So a lot of these are kind of art of the possible, as well as providing a number of layouts. So we'll take a look at one which is a little more art of the possible. I couldn't put this together. We had like designers, on our team put this together. But as you can see, it just gives you an idea of what you can do by bringing together a combination of the images, putting together a particular layout that allows you to overlay key information on top of it. And then at the bottom, you'll have the full source code for the dashboard, so you can see how it was configured, or you can clone it in Studio so that if you wanted to use this as a base template for your own dashboard, you can go in there and just clear out all the searches and put in your own searches, change the layout however you want, and then go from there. And then we also provide a number of like more, let's say more standard, more simple layouts that are more of that row grid column-based type of layout. So we have some key KPIs on the top. We have some additional information on the left-hand side, and then we have a map that's centered in the middle of the dashboard. So again, just to give you another idea of things that you can do with your dashboard. So typically, as we release new features, we also try to incorporate those here so that you can see how to leverage those. The other one I want to show, we also want to look at tabs real quick. So what you'll see is when you are in edit mode, by default, now your canvas will start with one tab. You can specify whatever the tab name is that you want. If you only have one, when you go to view, it will look like you don't have anything there. So those tab names will only populate once you have more than one. So let's say I add a second one, and this is my other new tab. Now when I go to view, you can see that the two are here, and as you toggle back and forth, even here you can see this is a grid layout, and this one's an absolute layout dashboard, so, or I guess canvas. So as you're building out your dashboard, you'll be able to have these different options available to you. You can then split up relevant information. So if you want to start with an overview, show some key KPIs, and then when you find something that's really interesting, click on that, then you can, have a interaction. And I know it's not like the cleanest demo, but just to try to be quick about it. Under interactions, as you can see, you can then specify switch to tab. So now you can say, okay, there's something really interesting here that I want to take a look at. Now when I click it, I want to actually take me to this other tab in the same dashboard. So you can provide a little bit of a workflow for your end users, but keep them kind of contained within one dashboard. And especially if like those various pages that you want to show them have a lot of the same like base searches, now you don't have to rerun them because you're not sending them to another dashboard and rerunning that base search again. Instead, you can keep them here and then just have your chain searches or what have you to populate different results on the different tabs.
You said you're allowing the ability to do multiple interactions, like you go to the tab and set a token, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can say I want to set a token. And then I can say, okay, now after I set that token, I want to switch to a tab and pick my other tab. And if we want to get wild, we can also, go to a custom URL too. And then once you have this here, you can then reorder to say, this is the order in which I want them to execute. Or maybe it's this order. So top to bottom is the order it'll execute. Okay, and I think the very last one was defaults. So what I've done here is create I have like a heat map here on my dashboard. And as you can see in this top right corner, what I want to do is apply the same, these thresholds to all of my visualizations. So what I did to start was set it up on 1. So if we look at color and style, you can see that I've set it up so that the background is dynamic and that it is using these ranges and these colors. So now how I would apply this to the rest of them is I would start by going to the source code for this one. And here's the expanded editor part. I would grab the relevant section. So in my case, it'll be this options, which specifies the background color and says, hey, I want to color this major value based on like a range value. This could be a match value instead, but being numeric, this is a range value. With the colors and thresholds specified here, which is defined under this context section. I know it's a really high level. We have some more documentation about all this. So let me take this, and I'm actually going to cut it from here. And as you can see now, what's populated here is nothing. And then let me go to the full source code. Here under defaults, there's a section for visualizations. I'll add a new stanza. I figured this would be faster if I put the mic down for a sec. And I just literally paste the source code that is associated to that part of it. And if I did it correctly, oh no, I have an extra column. You can see now that all the visualizations that have data populated are now taking this. And when we look at the source code, you can see again, like this has all been specified here, but it's actually pulling from the default. There's nothing actually specified on this visualization. So again, just one way that you can quickly do it, and my best practice that I'd recommend is do as much as you can in the UI. For example, set up one of your visualizations or data sources with these options, and then just cut and paste that source code into the default section. Cool. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for staying late. Do I hand this back to